So a very good morning and welcome to everybody into today's session. This is part 2 of the CMA and mastering CMA. If you were looking for part 1 was recorded, has been uploaded to the workplace group called Coaching and Training in South Africa. So do have a look out for that. You'll be able to catch up on part 1. Now today we're going to be looking at data collection and analysis, two very simple elements of a CMA, but vitally important. So as we start going through these different sections of the CMA, you're going to see that your knowledge will start getting up to that mastery level. And for those of you that really want a very impactful and powerful session, session number 5 of the CMA is one not to be missed. So you can work those numbers. We're on session 2 today. Next week will be session 3, the week after session 4, and then it'll be session 5. So just keep that in the back of your mind. You can forecast on that time and that schedule. Session 5, definitely not to be missed. So let's have a look and get into session 2 for today, which is the data collection and analysis. So with all my sessions, I start in the exact same way. How to get the most out of today and these particular sessions? Well, it works with this simple acronym, PCC. The P is for participation. Why is participation so important? Well, when you participate, it means that you're focused on the actual activity that's in front of you. When you are distracted, it means you're on your phone and you're swiping, or you're walking away from your computer and trying to listen into what's happening. So please always participate. Make sure that you're engaged for the time period that we're working with. The second, C, curiosity. I have the chat box open, and at any stage, if you have a question, please do not hesitate. Pop it in the chat box, and at the end of the session, we will jump into a Q&A to help you to answer those particular questions that you may have. So make sure that your curiosity is at that high level. And C, your commitment. When there's a golden nugget that is shared in any training session, make sure that you put it into practice so that you can actually master it. This is one of the reasons why I took the CMA package, this whole training program, and I broke it into 5 parts. If I did it all into one big session, there are so many golden nuggets that you could miss it out. So that's why we split it up and we stretch it over 5 different parts to help you to master your CMA. So don't forget, PCC, participation, curiosity, and your commitment. This is what's going to help you to elevate your game when you're looking to master your CMAs. Now, kicking in straight into the session, we're looking at gathering this property data and information. Now, in the previous session, I gave you just a quick little overview of things that you need to look at when you're working with a property. Because a CMA, a comparable market analysis, is not just a simple print out report and give it to your clients. There's a lot of pre-work that comes into it. And the reason for that pre-work is to get your experience, to get that knowledge that you have to the highest possible level, which helps with your self-confidence when you're at front of your sellers. So let's have a look at gathering this property information for your clients and also for your particular CMA. Now, the very first, it's the most obvious one, is a property history report. Now, when I say a property history report, there is no place where you can actually go and just download it. A property history report is something where you've got to ask questions. What type of questions? Well, if you're sitting in front of your seller, or maybe you've given them a phone call to get a bit of information, well, find out, has there been any renovation to the property? When was the property built? Because that built date, that year that it was built, will give you a lot of information about that property. As far as if it was built before 1984, then we know that we need to have a look at those roof trusses to see if it can handle solar panels. If it was built in the also early 80s, late 70s, you will find that their windows were probably the steel frame windows, or maybe even those Meranti wooden frames. So there's a lot of information for you to start gathering about the properties. And that history really helps you with the property. Now, for those of you that are working in suburbs, you're going to come across a lot of properties that look the same. You'll walk in and the look and feel is almost the same. You walk into a lounge, down the passage, kitchen on the right, 2 bedrooms on the left, main bedroom at the end of the passage, bathrooms on the right-hand side. And I'm sure a lot of you are nodding and going, I've seen a property fairly similar to that. That was a uniform type of plan layout. Now, when you're walking into a property, the great thing with that is if you understand that layout, you'll also go into new properties that have done renovations, made it open plan, which helps you to have those conversations with your buyers. When a property is a bit dated, you're using that information and say, but you know what, if you knock this particular wall down, it can open out. And if you've listed a property like that, you'll even be able to pull up some pictures and say, hey, guess what? Look at the layout looks like, same property, they just knocked this wall out, made the world of difference. So the first is property history, getting to know from when it was built all the way up to current. Has there been renovations, and have there been any similar properties with renovations? The more you get into this, the better. What I've always suggested when it comes to this area is when you see a property on show on the weekend, go to that show day. Yes, you're a real estate agent. No, you're not buying a property. Walk in, go straight to that agent, say, hey, here's my business card. I'm a real estate agent. If I have a potential buyer, are you open to sharing? But what you're actually looking at is you want to look at the layout of the property to get familiar. The more properties you look at, the better it is for you to understand how to have conversations with your particular sellers as well as your buyers. Now, the second is ownership details. Why is ownership details so important? Well, you want to find out how long have they been in the property. Is it something they've only been here for 3 years, bought it during lockdown, where they paid it at a premium rate, at a very low interest rate, which means that maybe there's a bit of a deficit when it comes to settling bonds? Or have they been in this property for 20, 30 years, and they've got this history associated behind it? Is it a heritage house, a house that was built in the early or late 1900s and early 2000s? When is the property born? I'm looking at early 1900s. That's more like it than the late 1900s, because that's 1999. That's just my brain that goes a bit of a squiff angle there. So look at property ownership. How long have the people? Now, the great thing here is you can go into Lightstone, you can pull up a property report, and you can see when they purchased the property. And that is such a nice information to have those conversations with your sellers. Hey, I see you've been in the property for about 8 years. What have you loved about the property? Hey, I've seen you've been in the property for 30 years. Your kids must have grown up. Tell me about the history. And you can start having all these types of conversations with your sellers. It really starts to embrace, because they want that warm feeling behind it, because it is an emotional conversation that you're having. And then the last, really, when you're starting to get property information, are those unique features of the property. So unique features could be a double tandem garage. From the road, it just looks like a double garage, but you could put 4 cars inside of it. Maybe it's got heated pool with solar. Maybe it's actually got jacuzzis. Maybe it's got that bar, entertainment area, sunken lounges. All of these unique features that could be selling features. Now, the only way you're going to know about any of this is, 1, research on Lightstone, but 2 is asking those questions, walking through properties and having that understanding of what these properties can offer and what they do offer. Now, why is all this important? Well, I said to you, because this is an emotional conversation and you want to build that rapport with your sellers as quick as possible so that you can get the trust to get the correct price. That's why we do this. So when you know more about that particular property, you will find that your rapport will come so quickly, and they'll start to listen to you with that particular price. So that property history, look back from when it was built, coming all the way through. And if you want to know the year that it was built, you can go onto the Standard Bank Look-See report, which is free. It's their desktop version. And inside that particular report, it actually pulls up the year that the property was built. So that's under Standard Bank. That's our bank. And look for Look-See. and you'll be able to find that report, and it'll actually tell you the year that it was built. It's a very difficult report to work with when you're trying to find properties, just as a side note. Then ownership. You want to know how long they've owned the property, who's been the previous owners on the property if you're wanting to get that information. But it's just great to see how long someone's been in the property and any unique features of the property, because this could add some unique value for your buyers. Hey, my previous sellers have been in the house for nearly 30 years, and they've actually done renovations where they built the property, they added on this, they added on that. I'm starting to have a conversation, and they've built this unique element to the property. You can see that when I'm having this conversation with my buyers, it's like I own the property. So that's where gathering this property information is so important, and this information you typically get from your sellers as well as some property reports and Standard Bank look-see. Then we start looking at selecting those, what we refer to them as the comparable properties. Why? Well, it's so important to compare apples with apples. And there's three little elements that we go through when we look at comparable properties. Number one is this criteria of the location, the features, and the benefits. So we don't want to compare a property that's in Johannesburg with a property that's in Cape Town. Very different markets. We also don't want to compare a 5-bedroom house to a 3-bedroom house, because you can see there's a difference between the two. We don't want to compare a property that has double garage and a pool to a property that doesn't have garages and it has no pool. So make sure that when you're comparing, you know the property, and you can then compare it with properties that have either been sold or currently on the market. And you'll see that in a future session that we will be integrating and explaining that in a bit more detail. So make sure that you've got those criteria. You need to know the property so that you can get those comparables. Number of properties, we generally work with roughly 5. And as a tip, always have an odd number, and an odd number greater than 1. So don't come out with 2 or 4 properties. When we actually do these comparables, when we have it on the desk in front of a particular seller, having an even number just makes the property the odd property out. It's a bit of a psychological element to it. So make sure that if you are doing it, 3 properties, it's a bit of a risky. I would push to get to that 5 properties in your number of properties that you're going to compare. The higher, the better. Then the geographical proximity. Now, I said to you, don't want to list or have a compared property from Johannesburg to Cape Town. You want something that's close. Now, when I work with it personally, I always look at it, keeping it within a walking distance. The reason for that is that property is going to ultimately be exceptionally close. So that means that you're in the same area, you're going to have the same type of buyers, you're going to have that same type of community feel around that particular property. So when we're looking at these comparable properties, one, identify the criteria. You need to know the property to compare it with location, features, and benefits. Number of properties, target 5 properties. That's 5 properties on the market. You get that from P24 or private property, and 5 properties that have already sold. You get that from Lightstone, that we'll discuss a bit in another session. And that geographical location, try and keep it within walking distance, which means that if you're going to drive, it's going to take you about 3 or 4 minutes on the drive. Okay, so make sure that you are keeping it. And the great thing in Lightstone, it actually gives you some distances as well. So you can actually go through there and remove those properties that are over 200-300 meters away and try and get them as close as possible. So those are selecting those comparable properties, which is absolutely important. Now, I've said this a few times, Lightstone is my go-to platform that I use to get all my information to build that CMA report. Now, in a future session, I will be sharing with you my CMA report that I've personally used, and I've put this together with calculations to give you that variable amount. We don't give a fixed amount, but a variable amount of you'll sell your property between these 2 amounts. And that calculation is already built into that particular form. That will be shared in a future session when I start going through it. So Lightstone is my data source. And when I'm in Lightstone, there are 3 areas that I typically go through to. The first one is the property report. The property report is specific to that property. It'll give me all the information on that particular property. The second one is the suburb report, and I'm going to be taking a little bit further in the suburb report for you right now, because this is how we start getting in those trends of that suburb. So everything that's happening in that suburb. And the third one is the transfers report. Now, I brought the transfers report in because it's a report that will give you what transfers have happened in that particular suburb, complex, etc. I use that as my third option. The options that I've listed down here: property report to give me that data, to give me that information specifically. Suburb report is a big one that I use for trends. And if I just want to know what's actually happened as far as transfers in the area, I'll bring up that transfer report. So those are the three reports that I generally use when I'm actually building a CMA. Now, I know that there's the new version of Lightstone that's coming out. I'm currently doing this training on version 1 of the Lightstone. When version 2 comes out, I will redo and upgrade these particular slides and show you the comparatives between those two. Now, when we start looking at property features and size and condition, there's a couple of little elements that needs to be taken into consideration. First are features. And when I say to a lot of agents, I say, so what are the features of the property? I get like this blank look. And I say, what are the benefits of the property? So there's always this confusion between features and benefits. So features are straightforward. They're the bedrooms that are en suite, entertainment areas. What stands out? A feature is a physical location in that property. That's how you can identify a feature. A benefit is something that gives you that warm, fuzzy feeling. The benefit of overlooking the ocean, the benefit of being on the 9th hole of the golf course, the benefit of close proximity to the school. So a feature is a physical location that you can take a picture of. That is a feature on a particular property. So it's got to be something that stands and highlights. You want to know what that is. When I start talking about size, now, sectional titles, very easy. You go into a Lightstone report and it will give you 86 square meters. That has been recorded under the roof of that particular sectional title. It excludes the grass. However, when we start talking about freehold properties, when you go into a Lightstone report, it's giving you the urban size. So it could be 990 meters squared. That includes the grass. And the grass, and for those of you that have got gardens with fantastic gardens, unfortunately, the garden does not add a financial value to the property. All right. It is something that's nice to look at, but it doesn't add a value, a rand value to it. What you need to start looking at is under roof. And in a future session, I will show you how on a freehold property to actually measure the under roof square meterage. And it's quite straightforward and simple, just using a Google tool. And within Lightstone, it does actually show you that as well. So when we start talking about size of properties, we need to start looking at the under roof calculations, that square meterage. And for those of you that are thinking, does that include a garage? Yep, it does. It's what's been put on the plans. So whatever's been on those plans that gets submitted through to the council or through to the Surveyor General's office, that is what we're actually looking at under roof. So make sure that when you are calculating that, you're wanting to actually work that out. Now, I see, Nigel, you put a comment in there, Lightstone, it's not just under roof on the urban, but when you look at the listings, it might actually give you a bit of a square meterage. Please do not use it. When you're looking at freeholds, don't use those square meterages. That is actually inputted by the banks, and they can be a mixture of whatever they're wanting to put into their particular system. But when we're doing our calculations, and you're going to see this in a future session, we take CMA to a mastery level, we start talking about the rand value per square meter. This is how we do these calculations on luxury properties, not just that overall. And last is the condition. And in session 5, I'm going to take this down to another level for you so that you can have a look at a property, ask certain questions, and know where that property falls into a certain percentage range so that you can start calculating those prices. So condition is about when the property was renovated, what needs improving, what's actually happened to that particular property. So these are the 3 areas that you need to start working on when we're working with our CMAs, because we have comparable properties and we need to compare apples with apples, not apples with a worm that's eating inside of it. They need to be equal right the way through. So those are going into this property feature, size, and conditions. Now, what I want to start talking about, and really the power of today, is something that really comes back, which is the trends. Because so many times when we list a particular listing, that particular property, the seller always wants the highest price. But what sometimes happens in that particular suburb, the property prices are going lower and lower and lower. Year on year, month over month, those properties are dropping in price. Now, as a real estate agent, you need to know what is the trend of that particular suburb, because you don't want to list it high and those property prices are just dropping, which means the gap from list to what the market is sitting at is getting wider and wider and wider, which makes it harder to sell. And this is a big reason why agents always find it hard to get that particular price. We call this pricing the property ahead of the market. So it also works in reverse. If prices are going up, suddenly you list it at that high amount, and within a week you sell it, and you're thinking, fantastic, I'm a top agent. But could you have sold it for more? That's the big question that comes out of it. So what I'm going to share with you now is how to see the trend of the market, to know, hey, where is it going? And when you educate your sellers on this, it will definitely help you, especially in a suburb where prices are going down, to get them to list now, because if they wait till next year, it's going to drop even further, and they may not even get their price to cover what's outstanding with the banks. So where do we go? Into Lightstone, you will see this particular report. And I'll go through this in detail now. You link onto this page, you'll see on the left-hand side there, it says Suburb Report. You would click on Suburb Report. It opens up that search box. You actually, in that search, you would actually type the suburb that you're actually looking to list that particular property in. Hit that little search button, and right down the bottom, there will come up a number of items, unless you've been very specific. Click on the view button. That will then open up a new page, which gives you, and it's a long report, all the information on that particular suburb. Now, in that particular report, what I want you to do is you're going to scroll down to a little section called the property transfer information. Now, it has these different sections inside of it. And what we need to look at is within these particular sections, we're going down, you'll see it has their first-time registrations and repeat sales. We're going to be looking at the repeat sales side. First-time registrations are developments. So we're looking on the right-hand side. And then below that, you'll actually see there's 2 columns, 3 months and 12 months, and then it breaks it down to estates, sectional title, freeholds, in estates, freeholds, etc. And it gives you all that information. Now, what we specifically going to be looking for is the very last line. You'll see that I've actually cut out the middle, else it'll be scrolling too far. And ultimately, what we're going to be looking at is, if we look at the very, very bottom, you'll actually see it says an average for that particular suburb, the total transfers, and I've just highlighted at the bottom there, the 3-month average is 1,988 million. All right. So when you look at that 3-month, you go all the way down to the bottom, you'll have a look at there. It says 1,988 times about 1,000, because it's in a millions. So the 3-month average is 1,988. When we start looking at the 12-month average, it's 1,808. Now, when we start looking at the trend, how we work this trend, and this is where I want you to take a deep breath, because for some they go, whoa, that's over my head, Stuart. Take that back a notch. So I'm going to take this to the slow process. We've got a 3-month average and we've got a 12-month average. Now we can see that our 12-month average is low. In other words, over the last 12 months, the average property sold has been 1.8 million. However, in the last 3 months, it's gone up to 1.9 million. And that difference is 10%. So, Mr. Seller, when we start looking at your property in your area, we can see that in the recent times, property prices have started to increase. That's great news. And this is where we can actually find our market statistics and those trends if the market's going up, which means that when we come into price that particular property, it means that we can actually price it slightly higher than what the average is at the moment. Not looking at the average of what's on the portals, it's looking at the average of the CMA value, which we'll show you how to calculate in a future session. So when we're looking at this particular trend is going to give you the trend whether the area is going up or whether the area is going down. And please bear in mind, every 3 months, things could chop and change at any given stage. Lockdown could happen and then prices suddenly go down. Suddenly we come out of lockdown and prices go up. Interest rates could go up, which means prices go down. Interest rates go down, prices go. There's so many variables to affect that particular price. So when we're looking at this, this is specific to giving you the trend of what's happening. Now, if it was the reverse, if the 3-month was sitting at 1.8 million and the 12-month was sitting at 1.9 million, it means that over the last 12 months, it was averaging at 1.9, and in the last 3 months, it's actually decreased to 1.8, which means we've got a trend that's going downwards. So it is very, very important for you to know what is the trend of those markets. And I know for a lot of you, this is hitting your head. That's why I've taken it to go a little bit slower. It's recorded. You can watch it back and you'll be able to understand exactly what I'm going through. And this is where the golden nugget is for you to go into Lightstone and actually see that report on the suburb that you stay in. Make it the easy one. The suburb that you stay in, have a look at that. Under that property transfer information, scroll down to the bottom. You'll see that line where it gives you the totals. You're looking under the 3-month, what is that total amount? And under the 12-month, what is that total amount? This is going to help you to take your business to that next level. Now, for those of you that kind of went, Stuart, that's over my head, don't worry. I do repeat this again in a future session because of the importance of understanding those particular trends. So make sure that you go back, rewatch if you have to, but understand those trends so that you can have those conversations with your sellers to know, hey, the trend is going down, Mr. Seller. We need to look at, and there's the facts. These are the facts coming straight from the deeds office, and you can have that out as well. So I want to thank all of you for this particular session. It's always nice to go through. I know that it could be over your head, but I want to open this up to comments. So if you're watching the recording, you definitely put it in the comments below.